Speaking of baits, baits are evolving and all the and techniques are evolving and as fishermen, we have to evolve too. And you see the evolution of forward facing sonar with live scope active target, things like that. And guys are having to adjust their techniques and bait offerings and the way they fish. I mean, I remember back in the day when guys would go offshore and that was kind of a taboo thing where you went out there and cranked and found them and did that whole thing and all that. Now it's like secondary. People are like, yeah, I know how to do that. I've done that for the last 10 years. And now I can do it with active target and see everything and do everything I want to. But to me, there are still a few things that we all would like to learn. And I always try to set goals for myself and say, hey, I want to be better this year at this or at that. And I actually have a really interesting question for you, Todd. If you looked at your career and everything you got going on, is there a bait that you want to get better at next year? Like if you want to go out there and learn and to master. And I say master because at this point this day and age, this point in our careers, if we're going to bring on a technique, we have to be really dang good at it. We got to master it. We got to try to be the best at that particular technique because it just adds to our arsenal of what we already have going on. So, what technique would you say that you're maybe the weakest at that you want to improve on and get to a point where you're like either, ultra competitive at or that is going to be a mainstay in your boat? What would that be?
So I'm gonna throw these baits out there and you're gonna be like, what? Um, so I fish different, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's how I've made, like I look at, bring up the thunder cricket, jackhammer chatterbait, right? I don't throw that thing
no, I
that
know,
much. I
no.
mean, and guys, when I say I don't throw it, obviously I throw it, but I'm not the Brett Heights.
It's not the first thing he picks up or the second or
No,
third thing.
no, I pick it up out of I have to, not because I want to. I
Yeah,
pick it up because like I see it's going on and I have to do it. And it's fine, I can catch them on it. But I always look, like I said, it's just like what the other, Andrew talked in another video um about pressure, right? And that's what we're seeing so much more now is pressure in the opens. He was talking about going into a creek at the James River and having all these people in there on them, right? And if you look around, I'm a guy who looks around. I look around at what other people are doing, not to see what they're doing in the
yeah,
sense of I want to copy them. I want to do the exact opposite of what they're doing. So if I
absolutely.
see everyone in there throwing a chatterbait, I don't even care if they're catching them. I'm like, nope, they're not catching every fish in there on a chatterbait. So I'm going to pick up something different. I've always been that way. And even when you ask me this question, something and do something different. When I first started fishing, growing up on Livingston, it was like worm, spinnerbait, crankbait,
Mm,
throwing in top water. That was it. I mean, those are the only four baits you ever need on Livingston, and you were could win any tournament. Cranking was a big deal. Like I was really good at cranking, and then we're talking the shallow water, down rocks. I used to crank boat docks like crazy, like little light crankbaits. That's where I'm getting at, like the little bitty Bandit 200s. I remember when Lucky Craft came out. I remember us buying a $15 crankbait and going, and everyone was like, "You idiots! You just bought a $15 crankbait." And I remember we won that tournament. We caught a 6-pounder at the end of the day off that crankbait, and we're like, made our money back. I was really good at throwing those little bitty crankbaits around, and then I moved to Rayburn. That ain't the deal,
no,
right? I mean,
no.
there's no calls. There's no rocks. There's not a place for a small crankbait on Rayburn 90% of the time.
Yeah, 90%. Yeah.
Not that you can't catch a fish on it. Guys aren't winning catching 30 pounds on Rayburn throwing a Bandit 200.
No.
And so I got away from it, right? Toledo's the same way, right? So then you start looking up and you see these lakes where we were fishing all the time, and crankbait, a little bitty crankbait wasn't them. Then I go around the country. How many opens have we gone where you see the final day, some guys throwing a crankbait this big, especially in the fall?
Oh,
Cody
especially in the
Bird,
fall. Yeah.
Cody Bird was doing it last year on, what was it? Neely Henry, I think,
Yeah,
or was it?
Neely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Matt Pangrack was doing. Like y'all talk about it, and when y'all, man, I just look the other way, and I'm like, whatever. I don't even have a crankbait that small. I'm not gonna throw. I'm not gonna go throw a crappie crankbait out there. And but even when we go to Table Rock and places like that, guys like to throw the wiggle wart, right? Guys that
True.
take over were throwing wiggle warts and stuff like that. Well, I kind of designed. I'm. It's pretty much already done a bait um in the mix of all this that kind of resembles all that. It's kind of different, it's not different, but so I've been testing it a lot lately. So I was testing it at Texoma. I got some videos on it. Not really, I caught a fish on it, but it caught like this world record fish, but we're not going to talk about that. But anyways, that's kind of one of those deals. Like that crankbait, I got so used to getting away from that style because I had to, and I could do it, but I want to get to where I have that confidence. Maybe it's not so much that I want to relearn it, but I think relearning is sometimes just a confidence thing of going, man, I'm going to pick this up and go throw it for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
Because a lot of our baits that we have confidence in, we can go throw for 2 or 3 hours, and we know that it's not the fact that they're not hitting this bait. It's just we haven't found the fish.
Correct.
Well, if you're not good with a certain technique, a lot of times you pick it up for 20 minutes and you try it. Well, I mean, you probably should have picked it up for 3 hours. You probably would have caught fish. You just weren't around them,
Yep.
right? Or it
Oh
might have been
yeah.
the day. I lose confidence in that crankbait that runs 2 to even 10 foot. That's smaller. I lose it very quickly, and so I want to get that back to where I can have that confidence in that to go. Hey, I'm gonna go run this for 8 hours today. Because I don't do it. I have not run a little crankbait like that for 8 hours in years, trying to make, like I'll pick up other stuff. So
No doubt.
that's what I need to do.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad technique or bait offering. I mean, obviously, I'm a big fan of small crankbaits. The Strike King 1.0 is one that I spend a lot of time with in my hands. It is especially
See,
in the
not
fall.
me. Yeah,
Yeah,
not me.
yeah. In the fall, it's just such a killer crankbait. But it's really funny that you were talking about cranking and that being like the one thing that you wanted to master a little better. And mine is on the same spectrum of cranking, actually.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, it's really weird. Mine is actually cranking a flat side. This is the chick magnet, and I'll be honest, I spend a lot of time cranking, but I spend a lot of time either finesse cranking, like what Todd's talking about,
Or deep cranking.
or deep cranking, or
I know
throwing a
that's
square,
me.
like throwing a square bill, like throwing a 1.5, 2.5, 4.0, something like that. I have not spent enough time with a flat sided crankbait in my hand. And let me be honest with you guys, a flat sided crankbait is one of, if not the most versatile, high pressure fish catching crankbaits that you can buy. Look at the success that John Cox has had cranking, and that's John Cox from Florida. John, and
Who,
I
who,
say that,
who, by the way,
yeah,
never threw a crankbait until like 2 years ago when I think we were on at Grand Lake. You remember the Grand Lake
correct.
one?
Yep.
That was the first time he had to borrow them from
I don't remember who it was. I know what you're talking
your
about,
old
though.
roommate,
Oh, Reddington.
Redding's Tom.
Yeah.
He had to borrow them from Tom because he only had one. And it was the first time he'd ever thrown one.
Yeah.
This is
And,
like
and
this was an FLW event like 3 years ago on Grand Lake.
yeah, and that was the funny thing is he's really acclimated and made a flat sided crankbait. I think he throws the Fritz side all the time as part of a humongous part of his game, because what he did is he said, you know what? There's certain times of the year that I'm getting my butt kicked by not throwing a crankbait. Let me go find one crankbait that I can get a lot of confidence in. That if I get in this situation, I don't have to sit there and think about throwing shad wraps and all these different balsa baits and all these different square bills and chatterbaits and all this stuff. I'm going to find one bait and I'm going to master that particular bait. And in this case, I want to go master the chick magnet because I know how good it is. I know who designed it and helped design it. That's Andy Morgan, and he's won a ton of money with it. And the chick magnet, among other flat sided crankbaits, is an extremely versatile bait. You can fish it 2 to 6 foot of water. You can change your line size to get it deeper, or shallower in certain situations, you can throw it on 20. I mean, there's times that I've fished on like Amistad, throwing square bills in the grass and throwing 20-pound mono, and just to keep that square bill higher in the grass and be able to fish it in certain situations, just because I had so much confidence in that particular bait. And I see a lot of times that guys try to, I can sit there and say, I want to be a better shallow water cranker. Well, that's not really being very specific, because at the end of the day, I can throw 50 different models of shallow water crankbaits on two or three different styles of rods, and I can make it as extreme as I want it to be. But the very best advice that I can ever give you as an angler that has taught myself a lot of different techniques, and Todd could attest to this, is to find a bait that you want to get confidence in and learn every little intricate detail about that bait, how it runs, how to manipulate it with your reel, how to change the depth that it dives with your rod, what it feels like when it hits a laydown in comparison to a stick, to
Dude,
comparison to
dude,
a rock.
confidence
Yeah, and
and
getting
just the
confident.
confidence to go
Yeah,
throw it for a long period of time,
yeah.
because it's not always that you're doing anything wrong. We're just not around them all the time.
Well, and and one thing I will say is, when it comes to a bait like the chick magnet, a flat sided crankbait, you want to find one that has a bunch of different colors in it. And I learned this method from fishing rattle traps, fishing billless lures rattle traps. We had 300 colors. Now, granted, the chick magnet doesn't come in 300 colors, but my point to this is it has a variation of every main color that I'd want. Whether it's a clear one with the transparent color, like a green gizzard shad, chartreuse, it has red, it has fire crawl, it has a bunch of different offerings, and that is really, really important when you look at a technique specific bait, or a bait that you're trying to build confidence, because you won't want to get in a situation where, like, man, the water's really dirty, but this balsa flat side that I've spent $30 on every single one of them, and I've got four, I don't have the right color for it because I only bought four of them. Well, you look at a bait like the chick magnet, it comes in a bunch of different color variations. So I can say, you know what, the water's really clear here. I'm going to throw in green gizzard because I know from my experience, I'm mastering this technique. Green gizzard is a really good color on this. Pick it up, start catching fish. So more so than anything, I'm going to spend a lot of time with the chick magnet in my hand this year, because I just know that if I can master this bait and I get it to a point where I'm successful with it, no questions asked, it will be a bait that stays on my deck probably year round, honestly. And that's a lot of times when you look at a bait like with Cox. I mean, look at John Cox throwing a wacky rig. Same thing. He mastered the technique of a wacky rig. That bait stays on his deck. I don't care where he goes in this country. That bait is on his deck every single day of every single event.
What's crazy is where we live, like there's so many people that don't get to go fish grass, right? Well,
Correct.
I don't get to
Yeah.
go fish a lot of rock, and I love Texoma. And you know me, like a lot of people are like, man, I didn't think you like to practice. Like you went to Texoma early. One,
Yeah.
I jumped in a tournament too, a local tournament. But I wanted to go up there for a day or two. I had some smallmouth things I wanted to like get off, out of my head.
Mhm.
Um, I, I wanted to go see some things, and it was pretty cool. Like I did learn some things about. Um, I wanted up there. I wanted 2 or 3 days up there of no pressure of practicing for an event, because I just don't get up there that much. And so I messed around with some giant swim baits,
Yeah.
some glide baits, and that crankbait. Like I went around with that crankbait a lot, and I wanted to go use it and throw it to where, like I said, it wasn't tournament stuff. I never even threw it in the tournament. I think I threw it once in the tournament, like down one little stretch. But it was really just I wanted to go um, get good with it, because I know I can't go necessarily always to where I live around and throw baits like that.
Yeah.
But Texoma relates to so many places around the country, like
Yeah.
all these rock lakes and all these places. I mean, it resembles Grand and Table Rock and Bull Shoals and all, like places you throw those baits. So I'm with you. Like the flat side, I know they caught them on the flat side, like a flat sided crankbait. They caught them on that. They caught. I know one of the guys. I think Cole Floyd caught him
Yeah.
on the chick magnet on Rayburn.
He did. Yeah, he did.
Right, but I doubt you can go. Not saying you can't catch a fish on it now. Uh, that time of the year was perfect for it,
Correct.
and but I wouldn't say a lot of Rayburn is perfect for it most of the time of the year, where a lot of these other lakes that year, like that time,
Yeah, you have a lot shorter window to learn it at Rayburn than you
correct.
do
So that's
others.
why I went to Texoma
Yeah,
to a little bit earlier to do things like that. So I'm with you. I want to learn that stuff, but you kind of have to like make it a point to get somewhere. Because I always tell people, everyone always asks me, like, I've done some YouTube deals where it's like, I think that I think they were the coolest series in the world. I don't know if they really caught on, but they were my one
yeah,
rod series, where
yeah,
you take one rod, one bait, and you go throw it. And I tell everyone, man, that was to me when I was younger. That's how I learned how to do things.
yeah,
Um, it forced you, it forced you to learn. Like literally, I take one rod and one bait. Now I don't go out there on Rayburn, and go throw uh, a bait that, I don't go throw a rattle trap in April going, man, let's learn the rattle trap. No, I'd go in February when it's good. Like, so I'm going
yeah,
to pick where I think it would be really, really good at that time. So I'd go to like Texoma, you know, pre-spawn, throwing a wiggle wart type bait, or maybe even the Fritz side when they're up there. Like I'll pick places that are really good. If I want to go learn a frog, I'd probably go throw a frog right now, right?
yeah,
It's spawn, a little bit of post spawn, maybe even a little pre spawn, garden fry, shad spawn. I mean, all that's going on. Now's the time to go maybe learn how to go
yeah.
throw a frog,
No doubt.
or a flute, anything it might be, and go do it. And man, you'll be amazed, because I did it one time with the swim jig, and I was catching fish. It was still kind of a hard day, and there was some deeper grass out there that I probably wouldn't have thrown at. And I got out there and I was just slow rolling, and dude, I smashed on them,
Yeah,
and like like it didn't even make any sense. And I was like, man, I probably would have done something different to try to even, I don't even know those fish were out there. But I'm just telling you, like, guys need to do that. Like, take it, put it in your hands, and just go with it. And it's amazing what you can learn.
no doubt,
And the
no doubt about
confidence
it.
thing, like you said, Andrew, it's a confident, like John Cox developed confidence in that
Yeah,
bait.
yeah.
And
And
that to me is,
and that's how I learned how to deep crank. I remember really, really early on in my career, uh, I there's a couple techniques that stand out to me because I spent a lot of time trying to master them. And one was skipping docks. And there's only one row of docks over by my house on Toledo Bend, and I would fish that set of docks all the time. Not because I was trying to catch fish, but I wanted to learn how to skip the bait under the dock and be perfect at it, be really good at it. And I might catch like one a day, maybe. And Toledo's way better than that. Toledo's one of those places where you, especially then, you could go out there and smash on them. But it
let,
was
let me
about going to learn more
let me
so than
guess
anything.
let me guess this, because I guarantee we've never talked about this, right? I want to guess this. I hope I'm right. I'm guessing you learned deep cranking like I learned deep cranking.
Yep,
How many people
probably.
have how many people have asked you about deep cranking and how to learn it?
Oh, a ton.
Did you do it like me? I knew nothing about deep cranking. I went and put a big crankbait in my hand and I threw it everywhere
Yep.
with no maps, no none of that.
Nope.
Wherever it would hit bottom,
Yep.
I was like, there's 14 foot of water out here, start cranking,
Yep.
right?
That's how that. I
For
mean,
days.
I took a deep diving crankbait box that I'd assembled, and at that time it had DD22s. It had, just a bunch of different. I mean, literally a bunch of different crankbaits in it. And I took two cranking rods with me, and that I took literally everything out of my boat for like 3 straight weeks. And there was days that I would crank and never catch a fish and be like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever
It's the
done.
same formula for
Yeah.
us though. Like
Yeah.
people always ask me, like, I want to learn how to deep crank. And I really just want to be like, dude, you got Rayburn, right? These are some guys from
Yeah.
Rayburn. I'm like, dude, just go throw it. Like you'll go during there's
Semi good time of year.
a pretty good window.
Yeah.
Like May's a really good time as well.
Yeah.
Just throw it. And don't
Yeah.
look at your map trying to like figure it out.
It's
Because
still
you're
fishing.
because you'll trust me, there's a lot of random one fish swimming around out there.
Yeah.
And you're not going to find these big schools all the time. You might, but just go start throwing it on these giant flats. I promise you, like there's Kentucky's out there. You'll get bit.
Yeah.
And then from there, you start kind of over time dialing it in. I knew that's how you were going to do it
Yeah,
until it
and
was great cranking lake. So
great
it's like,
cranking lake.
but it
I,
doesn't mean you always catch them.
no, and that's the thing, and it gave you a healthy respect for when,
Yes.
but it's not even, and this is a big point too, is it gave me a healthy respect of when I would catch them, but also
And when
showed
not
me
to.
the conditions of when I would catch them better than other
And
times.
when you wouldn't catch them, like everyone, I always
Yeah,
tell people, like, I always tell people about learning from people. I was big on this. I'm like, look, man, I can show you everything, and I can, and you're not realizing why we're catching fish the way we are.
yeah,
You go out there the next day and you don't catch anything, and you're like, well, why didn't I catch anything? Well, I'm like, well, I knew you weren't going to. And they're like, well,
yeah,
why? I'm like, because I've spent 20 days out there not catching them
yeah.
on those days. Like I
No
know all
matter
the
what you
days.
do, they're not going to bite that day throwing
Right,
what you're throwing.
but I know the days we don't catch them.
Yeah,
Like I understand because I've experienced so many of the bad days
yeah,
that I understand that it makes me appreciate and understand the good days. So I have that good balance. But if you only know when to catch them and you go out there by yourself, you're like, why am I not catching them? Well, you've got to learn those times of, sometimes the best time is learning not to catch them. Like you learn a
exactly.
lot by not catching fish.
No, no doubt. I agree completely. Not catching them is probably one of the biggest teachers you have because it gives you that idea of okay, because you can analyze everything. You say,
Yeah.
why did I not catch them today? What? And one of the best things you do is keep a log of it, especially if you're somebody that can't remember things or you're forgetful, whatever. Keep a log of the weather. Was it windy? Was it cloudy? Was it sunny? Was it a cold front? Was it hot, super hot, muggy day? You know, whatever the condition was. Did I go fish in the morning, in the afternoon? And it'll all start making sense. Like everything that you're doing, it'll make sense and be like, oh man, on these windy, cloudy days, they ate the crap out of that crankbait. Like it was really good. And on those
Well,
dead calm sunny days, it wasn't very good. Like I didn't catch very many. Like I caught a couple big ones, but I didn't catch very many of them.
like when I frog fish, I frog fish so much that when I go frog fish, I if I want to go try frog fishing, I'll probably never try frog fishing over 15 to 20 minutes out of a day.
Yeah,
And I'll put it up. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, hey, I'm not saying I couldn't catch a fish on it, but I know what it's supposed to be like when it's good.
yeah,
I'm not saying I can't catch a fish on it, but it's not good. Same thing with cranking. I can pick up a crankbait in some areas and crank around and go, they ain't on a crankbait. Because when it's on, it's so good. And I want it to be really good. I'm not worried about trying to catch a fish or two. I'm like, oh man, this cranking deal. I don't go cranking all day long anymore, right? I don't really
yeah.
have
Well, you
to.
don't
I
have
know
to. Yeah,
I
you
don't
know what's
have to
up.
because
Yeah,
I've done that forever. So I'm like, okay, yeah, they're sort of buying a crankbait today, but it's obviously not the deal. So a lot of times I'll put it up, even though I know maybe it might catch me a 10 pounder today, or when I
yeah,
say 10 pounder, it might catch me a giant because it is
yeah,
deep cranking. So it's in the back of my head, but I know they're not on it like they should be,
yeah.
right? And
Correct.
so it's like a little balancing act. But yeah, man, like when you get really good with baits, you get really confident in going, I know what it should be like, but it's not like that.
Yeah,
So uh I'm quick to put it down actually quicker
yeah.
and realize, man, today's not the day
But
to go.
that's the part of the adjustment period, and I think when it comes to like what you're talking about, the finesse cranking to my chick magnet cranking and things like that, it, it's always a great process. You got to know when to pick it up, but you also have to know when to put it down.
So
No
over the
questions asked.
next year, Andrew's gonna have to go throw that chick magnet, and he might go 2 hours without catching a fish, but he's gonna be like he's gonna have to get over that, the fact that like, and it still might be good. He just
Yeah,
might not have figured out like exactly the deal yet with it on that lake at that time. Same thing with me. I threw that bait a lot, and sometimes I'd catch fish, or like sometimes I wouldn't really get any bites, but then I'd like go back through the area and not get any bites doing anything.
yeah,
So I kept on messing around. Then all of a sudden, um, it was about, I got a bite here and there the first day, and then the second day I never got anybody. I tried those places and never got bit down them again. And then all of a sudden, I found a little pattern with it, and so I could run that pattern. I started catching these smallmouth on this crankbait, and I'm going, "Oh, okay, I see it now." But I had to throw it for a while. I had to
yeah,
figure out the pattern, and it was more or less that it wasn't that they weren't going to bite it. I just had to figure out where they were at, but I had to continually throw it, man. And yeah, we have to do that with all these baits we learn. Like
Yeah,
we
because it's
have to
not as
get that
simple as
confidence.
always just turn on YouTube and saying, "Hey, like here's a technique. I'm gonna be the master of this technique now just because I watched a video on it." And so I hope that you take for what Todd said, what I've said, look at a couple of our goals and how the process of accomplishing these goals is very important for our careers. And maybe you can learn how to do a bait for next year to be the master of that particular technique, and maybe it'll help you catch more bass, and maybe it'll help you win a tournament. But guys, I really hope y'all enjoyed today. Todd, I really appreciate you coming on and talking about a few of the things we talked about today. And I'll
And
see you down the road.
I'm going tomorrow. I'm going to the lake tomorrow.
Are you? I think I
Uh-huh.
might. I think I
Are
might.
you?
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's going to blow really hard, but from the southwest. So I think I got some ideas. Some guy asked me to do some more on the water stuff, and I'm going tomorrow. So I'm gonna get some
Well,
of that in.
well, send me some pictures.
All right.
All right.